This episode is sponsored by Revival Shots. Revival Shots are the UK's most reviewed and highest rated hydration powder packets. Designed for rapid rehydration, Revival Shots deliver a potent blend of electrolytes and essential vitamins to support your active lifestyle. Each single-use sachet contains 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks, along with 5 essential vitamins, including vitamin C and B complex vitamins. This formulation aids in replenishing lost fluids, enhancing energy levels and supporting immune function. Revival Shots are 100% plant-based and manufactured in the UK in a state-of-the-art BRC certified facility. Whether you're an athlete, traveller or simply seeking effective hydration, Revival Shots offer a convenient and efficient solution. Now on to the interview of the episode. We have a Chorlton runner who has coached lots of athletes to PBs. He's got personal PBs of 16:56 for the 5k, 34:52 for the 10k, 75:55 the half marathon and 2 hours 38:32 for the marathon. Please welcome James Moles.
Hello, thank you very much.
Welcome, James. Okay, so how did you first discover your passion for running, and was it always your sport of choice?
So when I was at primary school, I was terrible at any sport that involved balls. So football, rugby, cricket, you name it, absolutely dreadful. So out on a rugby field, for example, I just used to run loads and loads up and down the field. So no one kind of ended up throwing the ball to me. And when I went to secondary school, played rugby as well to begin with. But then started to get into cross-country running later on. And I think because of all that time spent running on rugby playing fields, etc., I had some decent pace on me. So as soon as we then started to manage to get into actually cross-country and the school introduced that, was where my passion really born out.
Brilliant, okay. And you mentioned that you captained your school cross-country team. So how did that kind of shape your approach to running?
Yeah, so I started, so we had this teacher start, and he kind of led our cross-country team, which was great. I just had a back accident playing rugby, so couldn't play it anymore. And it meant every Wednesday and Friday we were basically going out and we were running 6 miles and we were hitting it hard. So for me, from my own personal actual running, it was very much that I would go out and do those runs twice a week, and I would do them hard. I wasn't messing around. I was running as hard as I could. And because that teacher was trying to take a big group of, it was always the people who didn't want to do any other sports or were doing cross country because it was the easy option for them. And then there was a few of us who were really good. So for me, it was, I actually got to lead that front group when we were out on our training runs. I don't think you'd be allowed to do that as a 14 or 15-year-old anymore, but we were allowed to back in those days. Always hard, and always took that group along with me. So we were always making sure we were together, we were all pushing together. And I suppose some of that I've taken on today. So I don't do a lot of slow running. I don't tell my clients to do that, but I don't run many of my runs that slow. And I think I've always, in my training, run as hard as I can. And in terms of pulling people together, I suppose I've always really enjoyed being part of a club or Parkrun or what have you. I really enjoy that sense of running with other people. Don't get me wrong, love running my own as well. But I bring that from those days of doing cross country and captaining that team back then as well.
So it's interesting that you've just said about running hard, because don't they, just picking up on that, don't a lot of people say you have to run slow to run fast, don't they? So what's your...
So don't get me wrong, I do lots of easy running. I think the biggest run I always do quite hard on my long runs on Sundays. I've never done them slowly.
Right.
And again, I don't teach others necessarily to do the same way I do, but I think the narrative of run slow to run fast, I think if you are new to running or you are, coming back from injury, I think that's great. I do struggle a little bit with that narrative of run slow to run fast, because I think you're just training yourself to be a slow runner. Yeah. Actually. And so for me, it's more a matter of, Monday easy, Tuesday hard, Wednesday easy, Thursday hard. You get your balance of hard and easy running right. as I say, if you're new, don't do any of it particularly hard, because you have got to build the body's ability to be able to use oxygen well, improve your breathing, improve your aerobic base.
Yeah.
But if you're a seasoned runner, you know, my personal view is you should be putting plenty of decent running into your training each week. And I don't know about you, I'm seeing that sentence of run slow to run fast being used slightly less at the moment. I'm seeing more coaches starting to talk about the fact that the marathon training has got to have hard runs in it. It's got to have marathon pace in it.
Yeah, because I think, again, when I started marathon running, it was very much that your long runs were just time on feet. So it's like, you know, 2 hours or 2.5 hours, but pace didn't matter. But you do see a lot more now that people are saying you need to put some marathon paced efforts in there. So yeah, it does seem to be more of the narrative seems to be shifting a bit.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so just going back then to yourself, when you left school, how did your relationship with running evolve then into your kind of 20s?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm actually a bit disappointed with myself looking back. So I stayed at home and went to university, having flunked my A-levels. But I therefore moved out when I was 21 and, you know, met new friendship groups, moved to a completely different area. And actually my 20s were a time where I was getting myself into my career, you know, partying, drinking, as you do in your 20s, and therefore running became far less. So it was much more social running, which meant when I moved up here when I turned 30, and I remember vividly getting out, undoing the seatbelt of my car, getting out the car and just looking down at myself and went, right. And it really was, you know, I knew no one up here, so just joined what is now Pure Gym up near Debdale Park.
Oh yeah.
And literally just threw myself back into training. So be it weights, didn't really know what I was doing, but I did weight training, cross trainer, getting on the treadmill and really just throwing myself back in. I was actually quite surprised on how quickly that running base just came back very, very fast.
Yeah. And what motivated you then? Because you moved to Manchester, so it was about the age of 30. What kind of motivated you at that time?
In terms of getting back into running?
Yeah.
I suppose just going back and revisiting that love of the sport I did prior to my 20s. You know, I was really lucky at school. I won cups for my running. You know, my mum always used to say to me, she was the only person who did, but she used to go, "You can't believe how fast you are." And it was just that desire to do a sport that I was really, really good at. So I loved other things like cycling, what have you, but that's kind of what motivated me to start with, to get back into it.
Yeah, okay. And we understand that you, in your early kind of days, you did quite a lot of running on the treadmill, so running half marathons on the treadmill?
Yeah, it's...
Thought of it makes me feel sick.
So I don't mind running on the treadmill,
Do
actually.
you know?
And I will always try, during my marathon training, to do one of my long runs on a treadmill. And I do it because, A, it's almost forcing you to run at a certain pace the whole time. Yeah. And then secondly, I do it because my personal view is, if you can do 2.25 hours on a treadmill and the boredom and monotony of doing it, you can get out and do a marathon out there on top. So I do it more from a mindset. So I got back into, I didn't know anywhere around here, so hence getting on the treadmill to start with. I didn't really understand what the treadmill was actually telling me.
Right.
So, you know, looking back now, I kind of sit and think, well, I set it to what I thought was level 11, and after about 10 minutes it was up at 16, not realising that was 6-minute mile pace. And I would then sit for the next 50 minutes just doing 6-minute mile, but I had no context of what that actually meant. And, you know, equally managed to start then taking that up to a half marathon each Sunday. Again, just no context. I just thought, oh, everyone does this.
Yeah. So what made you kind of realise your potential then? How did you realise that was quite fast?
So interestingly, it was a race I took part in called the Kingston Breakfast Club. So the reason I entered it was my cousin used to run for Wimbledon Windmillers. And she said, right, I'm going to go and do this 8-miler. If you're down, come and do it as well. I thought, oh, I might as well do the 16. And so set off, did the 16 miles, and I think I finished about 12th. And even then, I was still a bit like, oh, I don't know how many people even entered, so I'm still not sure whether that was actually good. And about 3 days later, someone from work happened to be in the same race, and he was a coach for Wimbledon Wimbledoners. He said, "How did you get on?" I said, "Oh, I did an hour and 41 minutes." And he went, "What running do you do?" He said, "That's brilliant." And it was only when he said it that I was like, "Oh, okay." And started, I think, to get that understanding that I was actually quite a decent runner.
Yeah. Brilliant, interesting. Okie dokies, right, well I'm going to hand over to Callum. Thank you, James.
Welcome. So finding the right running community can be a bit of a journey in itself. So when you returned to Manchester in 2009, you joined Manchester Frontrunners. What made you go to Manchester Frontrunners first?
Yeah, so I did have a look at loads of different clubs, and back then I think the likes of Salford, Stockport, Sale, they still presented themselves as clubs where we are there for, their very best runners. I think they were just all starting to transition a bit in terms of being more open to a wider range of ability. But at that point, they still seemed like that. And I wanted to meet new friends as well. So Front Runners was a real mix of sort of socialising, getting to meet people, doing activities outside of running. So used to do weekends away, but obviously then having they trained at the Etihad, they had their Thursday night club run, etc. So it was a really good mix. Really enjoyed being a part of them. They weren't the most competitive club, but actually it was enough for me just to keep my training ticking over, and then I did my long runs mainly on my own.
On a treadmill.
On a treadmill.
So I've got a listener question from Ros Webster. So she said, what made you move from Manchester Frontrunners to Chorlton Runners?
So I'd lived in Chorlton for the whole time. I think Chorlton Runners and Manchester Front Runners started literally on the same day in 2005, whenever it was. So I lived in Chorlton. Far easier for me to get to the track at Chorlton. And there weren't that many quick runners in Front Runners at the time. And I kind of knew, I was 45, 46 when I changed over. I still wanted to keep competing. I have no intention of slowing down. I still don't. But I needed people to be able to train with. And I think at that point, I thought if I'm to keep this going, I need to have those people that I'll go out and do long runs with, different people out on the track who almost I'm behind. They're not trying to chase me. So that was kind of the key reason. Equally, I'm an event director at Stretford Parkrun, so I probably knew more Chorlton runners than I did front runners, because Chorlton runners were just so involved with Stretford Parkrun.
Yeah.
It just seemed a really natural progression, and actually worked in really well, because we then went into lockdown, and actually my bubble of 6 runners was actually people from Chorlton rather than Manchester Front Runners.
Right.
So it just allowed that really good group to come together at that period.
When did you move over to Chorlton then?
It was 2020. It was literally just as COVID hit. Bit frustrating, but
yeah. So going on to marathon talk now. So your first marathon was in Munich in 2010. So what inspired you to take on that challenge, and what lessons did you learn from it?
So I had actually come off the treadmill by this point. So I used to work for John Lewis, and we used to work 3 weeks out of 4 where you only worked Tuesday to Friday, and then you do a really long week the other week. But it meant that I always did my long run on a Monday, because you'd had 2 days rest. And it meant, even outside of any kind of marathon training, I was doing a big sort of 18-mile run every single Monday without fail, just for fun. And so when the club said, we're going on a club holiday, we're going to Munich, and you've got a choice of either doing a 10k, a half marathon, or a full marathon. And I started thinking, well, I've done a half marathon, let's have a go, let's go and do the full marathon. Can't be that hard, as people do. So went off in my A6 GT, I think I had GT 2000 by that time. No watch, no gels, no real understanding of what you should be doing, or people do for a marathon now. Did 2:55 on my first one. The problem being that I did the first 20 miles in 2 hours, and the back 10k took me 55 minutes. So it wasn't the most pleasant back of the race. So I suppose the biggest learns that came out of that were don't have any drinks on the Friday night before you do the marathon on Sunday. But I suppose equally I got back and I started to think about, so why did I crash? What caused me to do that? Was it nutrition? How do I go and sort that out? Back in those days, SIS gels were about as good as it got, but did start to then buy some SIS gels so I could then start to take those on future runs. And equally, I suppose, understand some of the training needed. So, I was doing much more threshold work during some of my training runs rather than going doing 12 400s, just to develop that sort of system that you might use during the marathon. So it taught me a lot. My next race was London Marathon, my next one, and it just got blisteringly hot. So I was really frustrated because I then got cramp. So having started to learn stuff, I actually did 2:57 on my second marathon.
Right.
The great thing about marathons back in those days was Edinburgh was 5 weeks later, and back in those days, with 5 weeks' notice, you could still enter it for a marathon. It's not like today, where if you haven't entered within the first 2 or 3 weeks, it's full. And I thought, I'm not putting this training to waste. So I literally went back out, bought more gels, got that better understanding again of what I needed to do, and did 2:52 in Edinburgh. So I'd kind of set myself that benchmark then, that 2:57 race was the slowest I was ever going to do a marathon, which isn't great. And from there it just continues. So it's what training do I need to do, particularly doing stuff at threshold? How do I make my long runs appropriate to what I need to do in the marathon? I think I spoke to Ben Riddle back in the days where sweatshops still existed, back in the Arndale Centre in Manchester. Started talking to him a little bit about shoes, albeit carbon still weren't a thing at those days. And just built upon all of that. So I think the next marathon after that was the first ever Chester Marathon. And somebody said to me, right, you've got to be aiming for sub 2:45. I've got to get under sub 2:50 first. And just everything on the day came right. So I did 2:44 at Chester, and that's not an easy course.
There's a hill, isn't there, towards the end?
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing's got a degree of undulation in it.
So to the half course was hilly.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got double.
It's hilly.
So, I mean, it's great.
I like that. I do prefer that kind of running.
Really enjoyed it, and great to finally go up. And again, then set a benchmark of 2:40. I've gone sub 2:45 now. I've got to try and keep going at sub 2:45 each time. So. And
have you got faster and faster at each marathon?
Yeah. So I think the next one after that, I actually got champ place for London, and that I already did. Put my heart and soul into training. Again, carbon still didn't exist by that point. I think being in London in a champs race is just really exciting. You've got, at the time, you had your own area to do your warm up in, you had your own toilets, and just the people who were there, just fabulous. I think I did 2:41 on that race. That was about 2013, and ridiculously, 2:41 back in those days got me 212th place out of 30,000.
Wow.
I mean, you'd be nowhere with a 2:41 these days. It really does just go to show how much everything's changed in the space of the last 10 years.
Amazing, though. Great times. Those.
Yeah, but the most impressive time for me is the 2:55 without any gels and no real
understanding.
Yeah,
I know, your first marathon.
I think that is unreal. Yeah.
I think that was just. I mean, my training back then simply consisted of. It wasn't even a heavy training schedule. I went Tuesdays and did track. Thursdays was my club run, but we used to do our club run hard. So we would go from the Sugden Sports Centre in Manchester, and we would run down the canal to Old Trafford and back. It was about a 6 mile run, and we were doing it at 6 minute mile pace, but you were taking in the bridges down the canal as well. So we were pushing ourselves quite hard. Saturday for me, again, we do pretty much the tempo, and we always did it up and down the River Mersey. Sunday, I actually did do an easy run on Sunday back in those days, and then my long runs I used to do on Mondays. But my weekly mileage was only about 45 to 48 miles a week back in those days. But as I say, because lots of those runs had a good degree of intensity to them, it meant that actually when I went to do that first marathon, my body found it okay, except in the final few miles.
Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't say easy.
Yeah.
So you've ran over 30 marathons, including majors like Boston, Berlin and London. Can you share a few highlights from your marathon journey, maybe a race that stands out as your favourite and another that quite didn't live up to the expectations?
Yeah, so I think my favourite race is Boston. And that's despite the fact that I went into Boston with an injury, so my right glute was just in bits. I shouldn't have started the race, but on the basis of how much I paid to enter, flights, hotel, I thought, I don't care, I'm racing this race. And I did the first half in an hour and 18, and then got to mile 16 where you've got the first of the hills up, and tore my right glute. And despite that, it was still one of the best races I've ever done. The crowds out there, going past the high schools at mile 13. And I think the thing that kind of really made that race for me was, so I got this injury, and it wasn't just the injury there now. It was about 25 degrees. It was getting really warm, probably quite delirious. And my left leg was having to do far more because the right glute wasn't. So it was completely cramped. And at mile 24, this huge American guy, who's one of the first aiders, just pulled me out the race. And he said, "You can't finish this race." I said, "I am finishing." And he literally sat there for about 6 or 7 minutes, and he just massaged my left quad, calf, everything. And he went, "Off you go and finish this race." And I think it's that part of that race that really made me sit and think, "I love this. This is brilliant." And then running down that final stretch towards and I did actually manage to run the final bit, towards that blue arch. And it was just amazing. And I think we were only 1 or 2 years after the bombing that had happened at Boston. So I think they still felt it very special that Boston was still going ahead, and absolutely wanted to celebrate that race. It just felt so exciting to be there. The other thing I'll say about Great One, so I think it was the second or third time I got a champion play for London, and it was when Mo Farah moved from doing 10,000 metres to marathon. So I was kind of stood about 10 places behind the elite men. And they said, "Oh, welcome to Mo Farah," and literally about 8 rows ahead of me, just this hand in the air. I was like, "Oh my God, it's Mo Farah." Really exciting. I think the race, I've got to be really careful here because there's lots of people who love this race, and Katie's doing it, and one of my clients is doing it. The race I found a bit weird was Berlin, actually. So Berlin takes you through a lot of just housing estates, and it's not the most exciting. It's not like a Paris where you've got monuments, or a London. But equally, the crowds in Berlin, I think they just go about their normal day. It didn't feel like the race meant a lot to them. It did to the runners, but not necessarily to the people who lived there. And so I just felt it didn't have that atmosphere, and particularly at the end. So I kind of finished it going, okay, great race, fast race, did well, but actually, I don't know, it just didn't have that same passion that other races have.
The atmosphere, yeah. Well, I think that's what I'll miss. If it's not like that, because that's why I love London, because I just love the party.
I think
know
what you
some
love
people don't
about
like that,
Berlin is there is just so many amazing athletes there.
Yeah.
And when I found this when I did Valencia last year, is you're just watching everybody else around you, and just the phenomenal calibre of athletes there. You'll get off on that. That's what will carry you around that race.
So what other marathons have you done? So we spoke quite a lot about the majors. Have you done any other more obscure ones, or something a little bit different than a major?
So 2 years ago I did the Lucerne Marathon in Switzerland, really hilly. And because in Switzerland nothing opens on Sundays, they do come out in force to go and watch the race. But they come out in full Swiss dress. They're there playing horns. It's really, really interesting. It's a great race. It's only very small. It's only like 1,000 people.
But it's picturesque as well. I've been to Switzerland. It's really
stunningly beautiful race. And I think the other race that kind of springs to mind, I did the Snowdonia Trail Marathon, the July one. Yeah. It's a tough race. Although, to be fair, there is also an ultra marathon that takes place, and I remember getting to kind of 26 miles, and I said to this woman next to me, who I really badly made the assumption she was doing the half, And so I said, oh my goodness, where is the finish line? And she goes, oh, it's another couple of miles on. She goes, how do you think I feel? I'm 39 miles into my ultra. And I was a bit like, oh dear. So I stopped complaining at that point that the finish line was another couple of miles on. But I mean, that was amazing. You know, just really technical. I don't think you can it's really hard to train for that race unless you're going over to Snowdon, you know, multiple times.
Yeah.
But just brilliant. I came ninth. I think I did about 4 hours 10 or something on that race.
Yeah.
I don't count that as being a sub 3 hour tight race. But
For obvious reasons.
Yeah.
for very obvious reasons. But yeah, really, really exciting.
Oh, cool. So you recently broke the 2 hour 40 barrier for the marathon at age 50, which is an incredible achievement. What do you think's been your key to like longevity in the sport and your success?
I think the thing for me is firstly, I don't think I've ever been that runner who's kind of done the massive mileage. So I think my peak weeks when I was kind of going through my sort of 2013 to 2016, 17 were probably 70 mile a week. I've never been that kind of 80, 90. I actually don't think I'd enjoy running as much if I was doing that much, personally. But I will balance it with doing cross-training and going to the gym a couple of times a week as well. And I think understanding my body and knowing what session to do on a particular day, or if there's a day I shouldn't do track work, whatever it might be, has meant that actually the body's held up and the body's managing to keep doing it. I think I've also learnt really well in terms of where my thresholds. So I'm running a lot more to heart rate these days, and particularly in the half or the full marathon. So I kind of know that if I sit at about 158 as my heart rate, I can keep going. So I've learnt lots about myself. I've learnt a lot about what my body can handle, what my race pace is, and that race in particular, Manchester, I don't deny, the weather conditions in 24 were just perfect. They really were, so that helps. But I think it was also that mental aspect. I didn't go off too fast. I chose not to get into a group early. I absolutely learned to ignore everybody around that race. So in the past, when we were running past Stretford Town Hall and there's people shouting out, "Come on, James," and I'd normally sit there and wave or whatever, I'd ignored everyone. And my focus was intently on racing. And it was the first time where I got to mile 20 in this particular race, as you're just coming up to the top of, it's near one of the tram, I can't remember which tram stop it is now,
Yeah.
and you turn right and it's then starting to go through south, and it's the first time I've ever sat and thought, I've got more in me, and I'm going to put my foot down. And just that sense of, oh my goodness, this is going really well. But I'd had absolute consistency in my training. I had kept the mileage about 65. I'd kept the strength work in there. And it's all those little factors coming into play. So I mean, even now, you know, this year I've done Newport, so I'm slightly slower, I did a 240, but I'm still managing to keep going out and maintaining it.
Can I just ask you on that then? So you mentioned, just touch briefly on like the advances in like gels and nutrition and shoes, obviously.
Yeah.
So do you think that has made a difference as well?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think there's no doubting that I would probably be slower now if it weren't for all those advancements and everything else. So it took me quite a long time to get carbons. I did get a hip injury in 2018. And when the first lot of carbon shoes came out, the lack of stability just meant I just couldn't race in them. My hip just kept collapsing inwards. So when the Pro 3s came out, and I was like, actually, no, there's more of a base, there's more of a sole. I've finally started to manage to race in a carbon, so I absolutely accept that has helped.
Right.
And I think we have got more and more insight now in terms of how much carbs we should be taking each hour, what sort of gels we should be taking. So, I mean, I do flip between Morton and then Beta Fuel. I don't like taking the same gel every time.
Sean does that, doesn't he now?
Yeah, because it's a difference in
your
fructose and
your-
glucose.
Yeah. Kind of learning.
And, you know, you just constantly learning, aren't we?
Yeah.
So I absolutely accept that part of keeping going and keeping that pace going is because everything else that's coming out.
Good. So Sean couldn't be with us tonight, but he messaged today and said that he wanted to add this question in. So he said that you were one in a group of runners, including Sean, that piloted Stuart Holliday's psychology race planning. What emphasis do you put on the mental prep for racing and training?
Yeah, so I mean, even for my long runs these days, actually, I will still get up 2.5 hours before. So, you know, Sunday just gone, I was up at 6:30. I was making sure I had my breakfast early, making sure it was the same breakfast I would have as if I was going out for a race. Still probably putting as much deep heat on my hip as I normally do. But the one thing I do try to do slightly differently in training is I don't necessarily always take the same number of gels. I try and train myself to need slightly less than I do in the race itself. But everything else, I try to make sure I'm almost mirroring what I'm doing for that particular race.
Yeah.
Race day itself, so certainly when I arrive at the race line, I need to sit and just be on my own. I don't like talking to people on the start line. I will go and stand on the side and I'll literally just shut my eyes. And it's not being rude, but I just want to go into my own space. And the other parts then are when you get into the race. So I absolutely use a lot of words when I'm talking. So the halfway marker of any race, particularly the marathon, I always say out loud to myself, "You're doing brilliantly, keep it going." In terms of any other, if it starts to get hard, I start to just turn around to myself and just go, "You've got 2 Stretford Parkruns to go, that's all it is. This is not that hard." I chunk my race down. So a marathon is 8 Stretford Parkruns to me. And if you actually watch some of my training, I actually do loops of Longford Park quite regularly in some of my easy runs, because when I'm then in the marathon, I just visualise myself running round and round Longford Park. So particularly when I get to that last 10k, it is literally, I'm just doing 5 loops of Longford Park, that's all it is. And for me, it's about how do we make that race slightly easier? What words are you using that's telling yourself you're doing well? How do you visualise that race so that it feels much less than what it actually is? Interestingly, when I first did Munich, so I work in kilometres rather than miles, purely because Munich was that first marathon I did. So I've always got used to doing it, and I find it easier clicking off kilometres, even though there's more of them, than I do miles. It feels mentally less to me. So there's lots of different bits and pieces there.
Yeah. Do you find it easy to use that positive, like, self-talk, though? Or do you sometimes have that, like, you know, chimp on your shoulder trying to tell you can't do it? And
do you know, it's really interesting. When I did Newport this year, so Newport, you do these 2 loops, and there was a guy I was running with, and at that 13-mile stage, he happened to run past 2 of his friends who were supporting, and his friends turned around and said, "Oh, well done," whatever his name was, you're doing really well. And he turned around out loud to them and went, "Yeah, that's the easy part done, and I've got all the hard work to do now." And I turned around out loud, and I said, and I made sure I was making it clear I was saying it to myself. I just went, "You're doing brilliantly, keep it going." Because I needed to hear me say that, not what he was saying.
Yeah.
And interestingly, he'd said to me at kind of mile 5, he was aiming for a 2:37. And it really felt like his brain, or he was getting into his own head.
Yeah.
And he did a 2:44. I'd said I wanted 2:42, and I did 2:40. And it was just about staying positive. Same goes for Manchester a couple of years ago, you know, did the 2:38. It was getting to that 20-mile stage and go, "Come on, let's go. Let's push this," and push and push. I think the other thing with Stu's course is it talks a lot about, if you're racing properly and you're racing to the pace you want to go, it should feel hard.
Yeah.
You've got to push. And there's no point in getting to the point where it's feeling hard. You go, "This is too hard, I'm going to back off." Mm-hmm. Unless you're injured, that's the point of why you're there. That's what you train to do. And so using some of that language to help you push through that pain, because at the end of it, you're going for your pint and your burger, and you're going to go and enjoy yourself, or whatever you're going to go into.
Yeah.
You know, ease off then, but you are in a race. Push hard.
Yeah, me and Katie did a slight variation of his course. So rather than being it one-to-one, it was like a bit of a group one. We only had a couple of times where we actually spoke to him, and then everything else was led by a Google sheet and writing everything down. And one of the benefits that I took from his course was that chunking bit. And I always find that in every race. So even like Mid Cheshire that I did the other week, it's just 3 sections of 1 mile, and you've just got this bit at the, if you know the route and things like that. And one thing I've started to do now is use that diary, the mental diary, actually writing everything down of like how I mentally were. So if anyone is interested, get hold of Stu, because he is fantastic.
Yeah.
And he does help. So back to you. So what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for vet runners who want to remain competitive in the sport?
I think the biggest challenge actually is firstly trying to keep up with the youngsters.
You're doing a pretty good job.
Secondly, there's a lot of good vet 50s out there now actually, so actually we're becoming quite a competitive group. Which is great, because actually we're therefore challenging each other. But actually, if you do want to go out and do well in the vet 50s, you've got a lot of people to beat. I think the most important part is understanding what your body's capable of doing. And interesting, a couple of weeks ago, and I know Sean turned around and he said, I think I'm coming to that understanding that hammering out a 15 by 400, his body just can't quite cope with that. And I think I've got to that point as well. I can do it, but I can't do it when I am on a track because I'm constantly leaning into the bends. So I think the biggest thing is your acceptance of what your body can and can't do, and adapting your training accordingly, which is what I'm starting to do. I think in terms of those opportunities, you know, we talked a little bit there about carbon shoes, and I was chatting to somebody the other day who says for all their hard sessions now, they do them in carbons. And he absolutely accepts that he therefore won't get the benefit of then racing in a carbon versus his training on race day. But he said the benefit is bringing him to recovery after he's doing hard sessions. He said he feels that's a fair enough trade-off, and I can understand why people might go and do that. I think, you know, we've got so much info now about supplements. I mean, I use magnesium every day. I use a magnesium spray on my legs after I've done a hard session. You know, there's loads out there that can help us recover. And equally, I think, you know, that there is no shortage of apps that are teaching us about what strength exercises we should do, what mobility we should be doing, and giving us a 15 to 20 minute routine. Yeah. And I think if you make sure, even young runners should do it, but actually as older runners, I think it becomes more important. Just spend that time within your routine doing 2 30-minute strength sessions a week, doing a bit of mobility, particularly after your hard sessions. As long as you do it, your body should keep up. I think the only other thing is your sports massage therapist will become more and more of your friend every month as you do start to get older, unfortunately. So your bank balance will take that hit.
So you mentioned before about the social and community aspects within your running. So how do you balance the competitive side of your running with that social and community aspects for clubs and events like Parkrun?
Yeah, I think two aspects to that, I think. So the club, I think, is absolutely fine. So even if I don't want to go and do a track session, on Tuesday night, Chorlton runners then have their own club night. And I will opt to go and be the run leader for the sub 7 minute mile group, and we'll often be running significantly faster than that. So I think you can still balance getting my own run and doing it hard and fast as part of the club. Parkrun is slightly different. So I'd love to do parkruns more often on Saturdays than I do. And maybe I use the fact that I'm the event director as an excuse, and I just need to be more trusting of my team to go away and do it, or just going, actually, don't wait if all goes wrong, tough. You know, Stretford is a really busy park run, and it's a tight park run as well. So it is one where we'll get comments every now and then about slow versus fast runners. So I do feel I'm probably there more than I would like to. And I'd love to be able to do parkrun more often. I'd love to get to reps at Turn Moss more often. That part of it, Saturday morning, is probably where I struggle. it does mean on Saturdays I then go out after Parkrun and I'll do my own run, but I find it hard because I'm then doing it on my own rather than with other people. So I think, to be fair, I've done 5.5 years as event director now, and at some point I'll need to hand it back over to somebody else, so that I can perhaps spend a few years in my 50s being able to use Saturdays as I want to.
So was there something about Stretford Parkrun changing, or have I dreamt that, or is it another Parkrun that might be changing? Like
Alexandra's recently changed, they've done that to basically reduce the amount of lapping in the course, because that's what presents these problems with fast runners and slower runners potentially colliding.
Yeah.
So there is Longford Park have got a £6 million grant from the National Lottery.
Wow.
Oh.
And the works are due to commence in October. So part of it will be building a BMX track that they've got in Wythenshawe Park, and there's loads of stuff going on, which includes resurfacing quite a lot of paths.
Right.
But they will also create a new path. So for those who know Stretford currently, you come out of the track, you turn right, and you're heading towards the switchback. There is the start of a second little path that goes down the side of the tennis courts, that then just becomes a mud trail. That is being turned into a proper path that will then go through the woods and down to the end of the switchback.
Okay.
So at that point, we will then re-look at the route so that we can take people down the new path. You'll only go one way up the avenue. It will take away that sense of, if you're overtaking and you're lapping, there's almost 3 lanes of traffic going on that straight there, but you won't have that. You will literally have just people going in one direction.
Because I always find that's where it's at its busiest, down the switchback, because you've got runners going in both directions, and on the second lap you've got runners going in directions on both laps.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it presents a huge challenge.
Yeah. So it probably won't be till next year where it's all finished. But
if you could eliminate the switchback completely, it would reduce so many of the issues.
That's our biggest risk
currently
in that particular course, because the benches on the side are also a real risk. So A, you won't have to slow down to go around the cone, and B, if you've got much more space on that particular path, it will help. We'll potentially turn it the other way round again, like it used to be when we first started, because at the moment, having fast runners overtake slow runners on that very narrow path next to the track is probably one of the, for me, because that's where I'm overtaking a big bulk of people, that can be a really nasty stretch.
Yeah.
So if we can do it that the overtaking will take part on the avenue, and as you're coming through the woods on much wider paths, that too will make it much safer.
Yeah.
And if I'm allowed to say pasta.
Yeah, but it's good as well that you've got, because you're running it as a faster runner, you're actually seeing the issues from what faster runners might encounter, especially like at Stretford where it's tight, or if you did Alexandra where you're seeing it at certain things. So as a race director, it's good that you've got that ability to run it towards the front and also run at the back, so you can see the version of the event from both sides, really.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's really good. That's all my questions, so I'm going to pass over to Dave. Thanks, James.
Welcome, James.
Thank
Great
you
to
very
have you
much.
on the podcast. First question from me. You've already mentioned that you're a coach as well as a runner. So what initially inspired you to step into the coaching role, and how has your coaching evolved over the years?
So initially, I have to say, the reason I did it was because at Front Runners, the only coach we had suddenly walked away, and we were suddenly left in a position where no one was coaching. So I went through the England athletics pathway of LERF and then surf. Felt like a complete fraud in the beginning, because I was just like, I know I'm a fast runner, but to call me a coach back then was probably a bit of a stretch. But really went out, and I suppose what I did back then was learn from other coaches who were at the Etihad at the same time we were, so particularly some of the Salford coaches, just chatting away to them. I suppose bringing my own experience to it. Reading books, just reading Pete Fitzgerald's book, and whoever's, just really throw myself into it. And I suppose that's then evolved because I started doing some work with a company called We Run, and lots of that was just people wanting to get into running, but there was loads who wanted info around their technique, their running form. So I've done my level 2 personal trainer. I need to finish my level 3 and 4. And I've done a number of qualifications with the running school who are based down in London. And lots of what they do is teach you about rehab for runners. They'll teach you about looking at all kinds of compensations when people are running. So I've managed to now get myself into a place where I can film people and actually turn around and say, look, that's what's causing your injury, or particular part with your running form. I had one particular guy I was filming the other day, and I felt really bad because if anyone's seen my running, my arms are terrible, and I had to sit and say, I don't ever want you to run like I do, but this is what you're doing, and you need to change it. So I always feel a real fraud when I'm telling people to do something different with their arms. And I think people's expectation of a coach has changed. So originally it was about how do I end up, doing a marathon at sub 3 hour pace. But now it's, I want that. I want you to tell me what's wrong when I've got a niggle. I want you to tell me what exercise to do if I've got a niggle. I want you to talk to me about nutrition, and not just gels, but they are talking about supplements, carb loading. There is a big expectation now over what you do. And I think the biggest thing I found is you're almost becoming a counsellor to them as well. Much of what you're doing is actually giving them reassurance that everything they're doing is right. Or helping them with what to do differently if something isn't going right. And that's one of the biggest parts of it, to be honest.
So we've had, I've got a question from Raz Webster, but before we get onto that, I just want to ask you about Chorlton Runners. So you've been part of Chorlton Runners for several years now. What does being part of a running club mean to you, both as a runner and as a coach?
I think the very first running club I tried was donkeys years ago down near where I lived, and went along, perfectly good in terms of the actual runs they were doing or in terms of pace, but no one talked to each other, and I found that really hard, so I didn't end up actually joining them in the end. I think helped by joining front runners, because there was that mix of social versus actual running. I think for me, being part of a running, every friend I have now I think is from the running community in some way. Even if they don't run anymore, I think it brings together loads of great people, and Parkrun's a good example. Even if I'm event director, there's loads of us then in the corner on the track having a good old chat at the end of it, be it about Parkrun, be it about a race they've done, be it just about their week. I think it just brings together some really great friendships, and just chatting people to start line of a marathon, I do need to go into my own world. But actually, if it's a race I'm less bothered about, I will go and chat to people on the start line. I enjoy seeing my compatriots there. I really missed it during COVID, actually. Not having those people to go and spend time with, run with, race with, see at the start line, chat to at the end. I think it's really, really important. And from a club perspective, having those people that you can go and, do your long runs with, if that's what you want to go and do, going out and pushing each other around the track. As I said earlier, it's one of the reasons I moved from front runners to short runners. I almost needed people who were faster than me, because I needed people to be chasing, to push me. And I do want that as well. It is about, that club helps me be competitive. But there's some great people in it. From a coaching perspective, I guess I really loved the fact that people want to listen and learn. We did this brilliant, it was about an hour long session back in January. It was supposed to be for new marathoners, but loads of other people turned up, and we just pulled together loads of coaches, physio, me in particular, and we're just talking about how to do their training, just being able to give advice, again, help reassure people. Even some of the fastest people in Chorlton will come and turn around and say, how did you end up going and doing that 240, or what did your feeling look like? So, I love being able to go and talk to people. I'm glad I'm a reasonably fast runner, but I'm more than happy to go and share that with anyone who wants to listen.
Okay, so we've got a question from Ros Webster. She's asked, you've recently gone full-time to be a coach, so what made you make this choice, and how has it been so far for you?
So I actually took my redundancy from John Lewis 7 years ago, and I said then I was going to go and do this, and then bottled it. And so it's just back in October last year, my company got taken over by another company. I'm literally working from home, and they are not giving me enough work to do. So I decided to start using the time to build my business. And it allowed me to work with some really great people across the marathon program from January to April, because I didn't have that stress of the day job, if you like. I was doing my work, don't get me wrong, but it allowed me plenty of time. I got to a point in March where I just went, this is silly. I'm loving doing the coaching side of it. I have to say I was really grateful that lots of my runners did really well in their marathons. Always helps. But it really, made me sit there. Actually, I do know what I'm talking about. I get the fact there are plenty of runners who are faster than me, or can go on and do other things. But actually, there's loads I can give to people. I love doing the strength side of it. So, my business is based around two things really. It is about programming staff and helping coach people in terms of a particular race, but then I have about 10 clients at the moment where I am doing strength and mobility type work with them as well, and so I'm just building both sides of the business together. Love the fact that there is both. I love working with people. I think that's what I missed in my day job, is that I was just sat at home working behind a computer. I just hated it.
Do those clients do those sessions remotely, or do you have a gym which you would meet them at?
So I am really lucky. The little gym underneath the steps at Longford. Oh yeah. They let me use it for a really cheap fee. Right. So I get to take my clients in there. Brilliant. Got to know Dan really well. So he's been really good, the owner there. Really accommodating. So yeah, most of them I'm doing face to face.
Brilliant. What's been your biggest challenge so far in being a coach?
I think originally it was, do I feel like a fraud? And actually, is it that I'm giving people the right information? I think where it is now is actually getting that really good balance. Everyone is obviously very different, and it's getting that right balance to turn around and say, am I loading them enough to get them the goal they want? If they're going to also introduce strength work, am I making sure that I've got the balance of what they're doing, strength work versus running right? And I think that's always the key is, am I making sure that I'm introducing whatever load I'm doing at the right moment for that individual? It's just about communicating all the time with them.
Yeah. Strength and conditioning is often underappreciated in the running community. So how important is strength work in your own training, and how do you incorporate it into your coaching for others?
Yeah, so I do strength training twice a week. As I say, when I got back into running over 20 years ago, I started by going back down to the gym, and I more, as much as I was getting on the treadmill, I was spending time kind of just trying out different weight machines or free weights or what have you. Except back then I didn't really know what I was doing with any of it or how it was benefiting my running, but I did it. And I've then learnt over the course of the last few years in terms of what are the specific strength exercises to do for runners. And I suppose more importantly now is if someone's talking to me about, I've got this niggle, actually, how do I make sure I incorporate the right exercises for them to be able to help them strengthen that? So absolutely do it twice a week for myself. Do try to make sure I incorporate it, but I'll take each person. So I've got some people, they are literally doing bodyweight exercises, they're doing clams, they're doing single leg raises, whatever it might be. There's others, they're on the leg press doing 100 kilos, but making sure that that's on a day where they're not running. It's just about getting that right load for each person.
Yeah, brilliant. As a coach and runner yourself, how important is it to consider a holistic approach to training? So considering things like the psychology of running and diets, etc.
Yeah, so this is probably where I've, as I said in my 20s, kind of the beer and the burgers probably took over. And yeah, I was probably about 3 stone heavier when I hit 30 than I am today. And actually, when I first, before I actually joined the gym, I did 3 things. I really cut down on beer, I really cut down on cheese, I really cut down on bread. And that alone lost me 1.5 stone straight away.
Jeez.
And then added back in running and lost another 1.5 stone. And actually, it got to the point where almost I wasn't eating enough then. And people turning around and saying, you need to be eating more, particularly in carbohydrate. And I think I'd really lost sight of, having seen this weight just come off and off and off, and my time's getting faster and faster and faster, that I hadn't got that balance right. So, really important then to pull back in carbohydrate to make sure that I had the energy to run. But equally, I think I've really focused over the last few years on my protein intake as well for muscle repair. So I am far more focused on it than I used to be. That is not to say I don't go out on a Friday night and get a pizza. And I think it's actually really important. I think some runners just get so obsessed with their weight, their training and everything else. And I think you have got to still have a life. And I think that's what I particularly at 50, but even if I was younger still, running should be fun. We should enjoy it with our friends or our running colleagues. That's not to turn around and say go out and drink every Friday night or what have you, but actually take that opportunity to just relax and actually allow yourself a treat every now and then, as long as the majority of your diet is sat absolutely sensibly as it should be and you've got that right balance.
Well, I've got a question about that. So,
relate to biscuit?
No,
I was going to say that.
I love a biscuit.
Well, my biscuit intake has gone down. Actually, the share price in biscuits everywhere has plummeted. So, how did you know when to have more of the carb intake? So you said then you were getting quicker and quicker and quicker, the weight was dropping off, but then when did you get to a point where you knew, I can't go any lighter, I need to have more carbs, or I can't go any lighter, I do need to start eating more?
I think really it was almost at the point where even the start of sessions, there was just no energy there whatsoever.
Okay. Right.
And so albeit, yes, there were some sessions which went perfectly okay, there were others where I was literally just sat there going, I can't even get around this track at all. There was just absolutely nothing there whatsoever. Interestingly, it was actually a member of my club who pulled me aside one day and turned around and said, because front runners used to do their Thursday night run and then we'd all go out for food afterwards, and I'd literally sit and have a bowl of soup.
Right.
As having run a hard tempo 10k, and I'd have a bowl of soup afterwards. And this bloke finally pulled me aside and went, "You need to start eating."
Yeah.
And actually, it was that made me sit go, "Have I got this totally wrong?" And went down to my mum's a few weeks later, and even she turned around and said, "You are sitting and eating." And I think people got quite worried.
Right.
Which has helped me in a way, because I've had a couple of people, not that I've coached, but friends, and I've kind of seen them, and huge mileages, both of them, to be fair, with, as we'd learned, eating disorders, and their calorie burning versus their calorie consumption was just totally out of control.
Right.
And having the experience myself of somebody going and recognising what was going on has helped me to be able to then turn around to these people and go, you need to do something differently here. You've either got to start bringing the mileage down, or you've got to start bringing your calories in.
And you normally associate underfueling with injuries. Did you get any injuries during that period where you felt you were underfueling?
So actually, not at that particular point, but in 2018, I made a choice to actually try and cut out alcohol completely between Christmas and whichever marathon it was. And I also tried to undertake a vegan diet. Silliest thing I've ever done. And literally, I got majorly injured. There was just not enough protein going into my body. Enough carbohydrates, actually, so energy-wise was okay. Nowhere near the amount of protein. And I've really had to go back and focus. I'm not a big meat eater, but I do enjoy chicken. I do enjoy, Greek yogurt, that kind of stuff. So I know what to do. And I wouldn't go back to a vegan diet, I'm afraid. I know there are plenty of athletes out there who can do it, but I can't.
Yeah. Can I just ask you about supplements on that? Because again, there's a big thing at the minute around what supplements work and what don't, and what you should be taking. And you mentioned before, you touched on you take magnesium, and I saw on your socials the other day you'd got some green stuff to.
So this
is... So what do you take?
Yeah. So normally each day I'll take vitamin D, magnesium, turmeric. What else do I take? Cod liver oil. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Weirdly, in race week, so I do beetroot like many people do.
Yeah.
I use ferroglobin liquid oil, which is an iron supplement. I think it's mainly used by women who are going through their time of the month or whatever it might be, but it actually helps in the formation of red blood cells.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe, I have asked Dan Nash about this to turn around and say, is there any science that could say from what I'm doing using ferroglobin that is helping in terms of my heart rate during my marathon? And he said there is no science behind it whatsoever, but he said there is nothing to say that isn't actually helping.
Yeah.
So I do use it. And then, so there's a friend of mine, he's a coach, he's a good runner, based up in Lakes, and he did chemistry as his degree. And he's developed this new supplement, which he's only selling very quietly at the moment. And it is there to supposedly help with so you take it about an hour before you're going out for either a particular session or the race. And it's supposed to help within that session, again, in terms of how your body is using oxygen. But it then helps in terms of recovery process as well. So I've only used it twice. I used it yesterday. I purposely did a long run. We've got Welsh Castle relays this weekend, so I went and did hill. I went and raced around Pocket Hole Clough 2 or 3 times yesterday, and back down. So it's about 28k. And I have to say, this morning I woke up and I was like, I feel absolutely fine. And that was a hard run I did yesterday. So I haven't tried it on race day yet. But will do. I did use bicarb or flycarb for Newport. I'm not sure whether or not I felt it did much for me personally, but I appreciate there's loads of people that I'm quite happy to go and try again. Yeah.
And you use magnesium topical, you say, like you spray that on your legs?
Yeah, so particularly again after a long run on Sunday, you can buy spray, I think I bought it from Holland and Barrett, something like that. And literally I just spray it over my legs and just rub it in, and that magnesium I think also helps in terms of that recovery process of the muscles.
We used some wintergreen magnesium, didn't we? I did find the lotion at night when I put that, and did help my legs to relax after a run. Yeah.
Before you get into questions, you've said everything about your coaching business. Do you want to plug your coaching business? What's the point in coming on and not plugging it? So socials and anything else.
Yeah, so my business is jamesmolesrunningcoaching.com. If you want to go and find my website, my Instagram and Facebook is also James Moles Running Coaching. So yes, please do come and chat to me.
We'll put that in socials as well.
Okay, moving back to questions. So you're also an event director at Stretford Parkrun. From your perspective, what role does Parkrun play in the wider running community, and how can it continue to evolve to be as inclusive as possible?
I think Parkruns, take Stretford as a good example. It started off week 1 where I think we had 400 people, and we're regularly over 700 every week at the moment. And that's despite the growth of all the parkruns in and around the Manchester region. I think it plays a really important part. I think it plays a community part in terms of volunteers. I think we've got a great community there at Stretford, as have many other parkruns. I think seeing the runners congregate together before and afterwards, I think it's just a really great way of bringing loads and loads of people together, and it allows you to do your run at whatever pace you want to on that particular morning. In terms of the kind of inclusive part, so I'm probably an event director which finds this a little bit tricky actually, because I'm a quick runner myself. I do sometimes get a bit frustrated when I see on certain forums or Facebook groups some of it's really important for Parkrun to be inclusive. They get however many million from Sport England every year. Their biggest sponsor is now Vitality. it's very obvious that they have got to go and do loads to make sure this is a health initiative as much as any of us view it as being a good chance to go and do a 5k tempo on a Saturday morning. And particularly, we know the NHS is under real pressure. So I absolutely get the fact that parkrun is a really important part of how we keep ourselves more healthy and getting people into habits. By the same token, I am a fast runner, or comparatively fast runner, and I do sometimes get frustrated when I see people on social forums who are then turning around and saying, why are fast runners here? And I think if you want to be fully inclusive, that's got to be as much of fast runners as it has of people who are walking, slow runners. It's all of us. I think what I love at Stretford is I do hear lots of our kind of social runners or what have you who will turn around to go, oh, such and such didn't manage to overtake me until this point today. And I think we underestimate how much some of the slower runners love seeing the quick runners. I know every now and then we'll get the comment, oh, such and such barged past me, but it's really rare. And I think we need to get away from that. I think the other thing Parkrun could do more of, because it will only ever talk about, participation or volunteering. I'd really love Parkrun to actually do something to turn around and talk about people who started their journey with Parkrun and are now a sub 40 minute 10k person and how they did that journey. I'd love them to, because if the whole point of Parkrun's being is getting people into activity and movement, why not talk to people about how you then take that on to the next stage?
Yeah. What's your opinion on the removal of the stats? Because I know it's going to be a difficult question for you to answer, but just both as a parkrun director and as a runner yourself, what's your view on it?
So I am that weird person that never actually looked at my parkrun stats.
Okay.
It just wasn't that, and partly because actually I'll go and look at it in Power of 10 or Run Britain actually rather than Power of 10. So I'll go and look at it there. I think lots of parkruns got set up by running clubs or by members of running clubs. And I think lots of running clubs did therefore view the parkrun that they set up as being an easy way to be able to set up a race, which parkrun needed to move away from that kind of narrative. I think if parkrun wanted to get rid of the stats, they should have done it 10 years ago, not now. I think they were way too late because this whole move towards inclusion and participation, that's been their journey for a while. Should have done it ages ago, but so be it. I think it's a disappointment that they took it away, whereas I didn't look at it much myself. I know lots of people did, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be seeing people doing better. I get as many, when I'm timekeeping at Stretford, I get as many people who are perhaps, they've just crossed the line in 29 minutes and they say to me, did I get them under 30?
Yeah.
It isn't just about the people who are doing 15 minutes. No. The people who are doing 30, 35 minutes want to know that they are improving as well. And I get the fact that they can say that on Strava each week, but actually I think they liked seeing that.
Yeah, there was obviously very mixed views about it at the time, but a lot of the comments I saw that were against the removal of the stats were actually from runners further down the field, if you like.
Yeah,
because everybody likes to celebrate their own personal achievements.
Yeah, and particularly as older runners, I think we wanted to see ourselves in comparison to people of our. I know we can still see a bit of the age grading, but that's as much as we can see now. Even as event director, and I know I shouldn't, it shouldn't matter, but I used to love the fact that I could go and see how many people participated at Stretford versus every other parkrun, and I can't see that anymore. I appreciate, again, parkrun has grown enormously, so Stretford doesn't regularly come in the top 10 anymore. But as we came,
nice to see
but we used to be in the top 10 every week, and it was really exciting.
It must be nice for you because there's that website page Fast Running, and they publish the top 10 times of the week in the country. It must always be nice for you when you get one of the times at Stretford in that list.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, I think our volunteers love seeing fast people racing around our course, actually. But I think the runners, providing there's no argy-bargy going on, I think the runners, all the pack, love seeing that happen. And that translates into other races. You look at Manchester Marathon and the crowds out around Stretford Town Hall who are there they want to see the fast runners coming through. I know they're there to see friends as well, but they love watching it. I do think we underestimate how much, our social runners, our slower runners, or people who are getting older still love to see it.
Yeah.
There's we shouldn't be embarrassed about competition within running. And I think we've been made a little bit to feel embarrassed about competition in running.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. So what are your goals for the coming year as a coach and as a runner?
I'll start with runner. I'm in Welsh Castles Relay this weekend. So I think I'm on a Sunday leg. I think they're just jigging that around a little bit. I've never done it. I've wanted to do it for years, and every time there's been something on. So I'm really looking forward to that. In July, I'm actually doing the Leeds Endure 24-hour relay with Russell Coates. So we're doing it as a pair, and our goal is that we will do the highest mileage.
Is that why you do as many laps as you can in 24 hours?
That's the one. Yeah, so our goal is to try and be the first pair, or the pair with the highest number of laps, and come first. And was going to do the Trafford 10K, but not anymore.
Sadly
not. And then I'm doing the Budapest Marathon in October. So I just fancy doing something a bit different, and it's not necessarily going to be a sub 240 type challenge. I'm out there for a week's holiday, but just want to do something really different. What I haven't done before. So that's that one. I suppose as a coach, I've got lots of people coming to me now talking about Manchester Half, a few people talking to me about October marathons, and it's really about building that portfolio of clients across all kind of paces, really, and equally then going away and finishing those further qualifications in terms of personal training so that I can then help further with that strength piece. What I have got is quite a lot of people who are over 40 coming to me. And I suppose if I want to think about, I don't care who I'm coaching. Certainly some of the guys I had in the lead into Manchester and London were kind of young 20-somethings, wanting to go out and get their sub-250s and did. But actually, I'm getting quite a few people who are over 40 wanting to come to me to say, how are you still doing this? And that's the real experience I think I can bring to some of those people. I suspect where my point of difference will probably come.
Yeah. Can I just ask you then, for those goals that you've got yourself as well, do you get coached or do you just coach yourself?
I just coach myself. Isn't that bad?
No, it's always interesting because again, seeing on like Instagram coaches talking about just because I'm a coach, I've still got a coach, but you don't.
So I suppose I've used different things over the years. I have used personal trainers myself, and I've used personal trainers specifically to understand strength. There's a business in Salford Keys called Fix My Run, and I think Joe there has taught me a lot about how you work through rehab for runners, or particularly coming back from injury. I suppose I use insight from other people. So my sports massage guy, he used to play roller hockey for England. But the two of us will talk a lot about muscular endurance, we'll talk about that kind of stuff. So I suppose I'm just getting insight from different people. It's not necessarily about, I don't want to be with a coach.
You don't have anyone doing your programming or
I'm not, no. But by the same token, I still enjoy learning from lots of people.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right, we're now going to move on to our famous quickfire round. So, road or trail?
Or for the marathon, actually probably road, but actually just for sheer enjoyment, trail.
Morning or evening workouts?
Morning.
Long intervals or tempo runs?
Ooh, tempo.
Hill sprints or flat sprints?
Hill.
Recovery runs or rest days?
Cross trainer.
Like it. Heart rate zone training or pace-based training?
That's recently changed. So what you always had been pace, and I think now I'm starting to move to heart rate.
Interesting. Cross training or focus solely on running?
I like introducing a bit of cross training, but I love running.
Okay. And finally, competitive mindset or fun and enjoyment?
Competitive mindset.
I thought you might say that. Okay, right, that's all of our questions for tonight. So thank you very much for joining us, James.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been really good.
Yeah, cheers, James. Good luck with everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on.
In our next episode, we'll be speaking to a Bury AC runner. She has PBs of 18.19 for 5k, 38.07 for 10k, 83.15 for the half marathon, and 2:59.23 for the marathon. We'll be speaking to Elliot Braithwaite. So get those questions in for Elliot in the usual ways, and remember, it's not about how fast you go, it's about how far you've come and the people you meet along the way.